very happy to announce our next candidate, Mr. Scott Peregoodoff.
From the Telus building in Vancouver and houses in the forest to waterfront houses in Italy. Look at these three buildings. Can you guess what they have in common? They all had a vision in mind. They all had an architect design them, and they're all designed with one goal in mind. Good morning, my name is Scott Peregoodoff. Today my hope is to show you how I designed and created a house. I also hope to give you an insight on the specifics of buildings and what you need to build. I chose architecture for a number of reasons. First, architecture was something that was introduced to me by my math teacher in grade 8, Jennifer Hendrickson. She had tasked us with designing a house. This was called the Architectometry Project, where we learned a bit about how to design the house. I enjoyed this project, and it led me to explore architecture further. Second, I wanted to pursue architecture as a professional career. Lastly, the project allowed for me to be able to link my interest in architecture into the environment. Today I'll be covering what architecture is, my process to designing a house, and the design process. It's not the beauty of a building you should look at, it's the construction of the foundation that will stand the test of time. Architecture is the art or practice of designing and constructing a building. It is the understanding of how a building works and how that building is supported. It determines what materials were used in the process of making that building, how the building gets its energy, and the design of the building. The tools of an architect are very important. This is because they can help limit the amount of mistakes made during designing and building. Tools can be a variety of things, such as computer automated design, also known as CAD. Some examples of CAD are SketchUp. This is my choice CAD tool as it's easy to use, and it can be used in the designing of a house and is very easy for a user to become quite familiar with. It can also allow for the designer to make a slope or input the topography into the design. SketchUp also does not have many options for adjusting curvature. AutoCAD is more used for designing products rather than a house because it can be taken into a lot more detail. If you wanted to put a lot more time and effort into making computer automated design, I would suggest AutoCAD. A tracing desk, also known as a light box, is a very important thing for an architect to have. It can be used in the tracing of a topographic map, and they can also be used for copying down work or other important documents that can't be photocopied, such as old text or pieces of art. Tracing paper is a very thin paper that is almost transparent. It is made to have very low opacity. This allows for light to pass through it. Tracing paper can be used for tracing maps, drawings, and designs. There are many different types of pencils that can be used when writing, drawing, tracing, etc. But to make things easier, you can use a specific type of pencil. When tracing, try to use a softer pencil as it will be easier to erase. When drawing a house, try to use a hard pencil as it will keep your lines straight and professional. When shading, use a medium to soft pencil. This will allow for a little bit of smudging. Rulers allow for your lines to be straight and professional, and make sure you have straight lines. A protractor is used when the designer needs to find out an angle or keep the angle consistent throughout the drawings. How did I get to where I am today? When I decided I wanted to do this project, I had no clue where to start. I was lost until I met my Masterworks advisors, James Tour and Don Nicholson. They introduced me to the design process. This is the journey the architect and homeowners take from the beginning idea to the finished product. I started with a scrapbook where I gathered ideas, collected images of elements that I liked, and created a wish list of all the components I wanted in my house. I then went to the Squamish Eco Home Hub. This is where they hold open houses to showcase green-built homes and buildings. Touring the homes gave me many ideas of what I wanted in my own house. The next phase of the design process is choosing a site for the house. I could create my own, use my family's site, or choose a public site. There were so many decisions, so I ended up choosing the easiest, most time-efficient option for my family's site. I got a contour map of the property and set about to make the 3D model of the house. I then started making my computer automated design. This being very time consuming, I decided to work on it over the winter. This allowed me to draw my house and decide what size it was going to be and features I wanted. I started off my process of building the model by making sure I had the most expensive, state-of-the-art tools. To build a model, you need to make sure you have an X-Acto knife, foam board, pencils, and tracing paper. After I designed my house in the computer, I started to make the topographic model. The purpose of the topographic model is to find out where to place the house according to the contours of the property as well as the view and access to the sun. This consisted of me tracing the topo lines on my dad's map. I then had to trace the lines onto the first piece of foam board. This repeated for about 50 layers. After I made the topographic model, I was able to choose the site. There are so many aspects that came into play, such as the sun angle, the view, and the location of the trees in my property. After I decided where I wanted the house to be, I started making the 3D model of the house based off my previous computer automated design drawing. I started by making the floor of the house. I then made stilts for the house, and after this, I measured all the lengths of the walls. After a few tries, I got the walls relatively straight. I then glued these down and went on to the next floor. After the second floor walls were made, I made the roof. My roof was a shed roof at about a 30-degree angle. This was the best angle because it allowed for snow to be able to fall off. Another consideration of the roof design was to hold solar panels. The solar panels will be applied to the top of the roof, facing the morning sun, and slowly lower following the sun until about 4 o'clock. The sun will then disappear past the range of the solar panels. The sun moves from the back of my house to the front, allowing for about 11 hours in the summer and 8 hours of sun in the winter. This means I would save about $511 a year on electricity. I used a site called PV Watts to calculate the amount of solar energy. The solar panels will provide electricity and save money on my electricity bill. BC Hydro offers a service that will take money away from my electricity bill if you decide not to store it in your batteries. After building the model, the next stage in the design process is to choose the materials for the house. There are many different building materials available depending on what the homeowner wants. I wanted to have a green built home that is environmentally friendly, so I chose materials that were specifically created with energy efficiency in mind. The benefits of having a green building is that it's built for the environment, healthier for the homeowner, and helps people have cheaper electricity, gas, and water bills. There are companies that can help by providing a certain standard of practice and materials. There are many green building certification organizations that aim to provide builders and homeowners with a standard of practice and materials. Here's a list of the few that are in the USA and Canada. LEED, Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, Canada Green Building Council, and Energy Star. LEED's mission is to help the environment return to its original state. This means healthy, strong, and less extreme. By less extreme, I mean less natural disasters and lower amounts of global warming. LEED does this because residential and industrial buildings contribute to about 35% of all greenhouse gases. Additionally, 35% of landfill waste comes from the demolition of these homes, office buildings, and other buildings. A staggering 70% of municipal water is consumed in and around these buildings. Canada Green Building Council is an organization that helps the environment in more of an industrial way, such as change industry standards, develop practices and guidelines, advocate for green building, and develop educational tools. Energy Star is mainly used as a standard for residential building. This company also rates household appliances like dishwashers, stoves, washing and drying machines. With Energy Star, over a typical 7 to 8 years a family lives in a home, they will save many thousands of dollars on their water, electrical, and gas bills. Materials are a very key ingredient when it comes to making a house. The ingredients in a greenhouse should be fire retardant, mold resistant, and water repellent. For my house, I chose concrete flooring as it allows for a certain type of heating. It is also a good insulator and will stay hot or cold. Concrete can also be recycled, which means it's very environmentally friendly. I was debating whether to use steel exterior walls or to use concrete walls. I ended up going with steel exterior because they look nice and are not bad for the environment. This is because they are recyclable. The metal sheeting is also energy efficient. I will be talking about a couple of different water and energy saving techniques. Gray water collection and use can be used to collect water for showers and other household appliances. The gray water is then transferred through piping to municipal and or private sewage systems and used for other purposes. In a home that is using an average of 380 liters a day can save 230 liters. That's more than 79,000 liters of water a year for one household. Last of all, a technique called heat exchange. Incoming water is wrapped around the exiting warm gray water. There. This causes the incoming water to be heated by the outgoing water. In a typical shower, only 10% of the energy used to heat that water is used. This means 90% of the energy goes down the drain with the water. I wanted to go with conventional heating at first. But I ended up going with radiant floor heating. This has greatly influenced my choice to have concrete floors and a concrete slab for a base. Radiant in-floor heating is when you put PVC piping through the concrete and run it through the pipes. I chose insulation from Roxol because they make their insulation out of ground rock, meaning that it's recyclable. Oxyl insulation can withstand heat up to 1,170 degrees Celsius, which is well above the heat of typical house fires. This insulation does not burn or release toxic fumes when exposed to high heat. It prevents the spread of fire, providing an extra minute to escape the house. Insulation keeps heat in and cold out. It is also water repellent and fire resistant. Because this insulation is mold resistant, it will result in a safer indoor environment. Roxol also effectively reduces the amount of airflow and sound transmission, meaning parents don't have to listen to their kids arguing. Low E windows. To understand what these windows do, we need to understand what ultraviolet and infrared waves are. Ultraviolet waves are the waves that burn our skin when we don't use sunscreen. Infrared waves are the waves that make us feel hot when we're suntanned. These waves make up about 56% of sunlight. The other 44% is seeable light. When you use low E windows, it stops the ultraviolet and infrared waves from getting into your house. Wouldn't it be cool, no pun intended, if heat didn't travel through your window in the summers? Or if your precious expensive heat didn't get lost through your windows in the winter? A building code is a set of rules that specify the minimum standard of construction a building uses. Building codes are important in many different situations. They're important to keep the environment healthy by limiting the footprint and height of the house. They also ensure the house is safe and uses proper materials for the structure and safety of residents. I will be going over 2 of these building codes. The building should not cover more than 40% of the site's area, and it must not exceed 9.5 meters in height or 2.5 stories. This specific building code is a limit for only residential buildings and can be overridden in some cases. A green society is important to me because as a human race, we need to be mindful that our planet is so fragile. This means trying to use renewable energy, trying not to use fossil fuels, and taking care of the animals on this earth. This is important to me because it will affect my generation and my grandchildren's generation. In order to create green buildings, we need to follow the guidelines of a green building organization. You need to have the tools to create a model and computer automated designs. The house I envision fits to LEED standards, meaning that it's energy efficient and uses green products. I would like to thank my Masterworks advisors, James Tour and Don Nicholson. I'd also like to thank Pam for pushing me to do work when I didn't want to. Also, my parents for asking me whether I had any Masterworks to do. And moral support. And last of all, I would like to thank all of you for watching my presentation.